Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful day today. And joining me is Micah Current. Micah, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Uh, I can't complain. Things have been going pretty well, but there's also been a lot of things within the whole church Christian world that seems to just be wild. I know we haven't done stories gone wild in a little bit, but I know just within the last week, and I think it's like Worthington or Wellington, Ohio. There's a big like Seventh-day Adventist church out there. And the youth pastor got arrested because he was using three of the church computers to download child pornography, almost 15 terabytes worth of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like, holy crap. So, and that's like not even like, oh, that's in California. That's like 15, 20 minutes away from me.
Well, how about the worship pastor, former American Idol that murdered his wife?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's close too. That's what Dayton area.
yeah, that's Dayton. Yeah. That's actually probably a little bit closer to you than it is to me, but still, it's close.
And then there was I don't know if you sent it to me. I don't know who sent it to me. The mega church pastor in Indiana who got
Oh,
fired.
yeah, yep, that
No,
was
he didn't
me.
fire. He resigned.
He resigned. Yeah.
He resigned because he and his wife were filming their extracurricular activities and it became public.
It became public because their son was under investigation for child indecency charges. And then when they were pulling, and that's the crazy thing about that story, because as they're pulling up information, they took the family's computers and stuff. That's how they uncovered the pastor and his wife's stuff, which is like, oh, which, so it wasn't necessarily that it became public because it became part of a case, an investigation for their son. And even though that has nothing to do with their son, it just came up. And because it came up in a public space, then people started asking questions, and that's how that ended up. So, oh man. So yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of material to talk about. But Micah, you said that you had something to talk about. So what's on your mind?
Oh, I just wanted to get your opinion on something. And it's kind of close to the chest. And I'm gonna let myself be vulnerable for a little bit. But um I was scrolling through the TikTok last night
Hmm.
and I came across this video of a senior pastor and his wife who got up at the end of a service and announced that they were feeling called to start a new ministry. And the ministry involved parents who dealt with estranged children or children who were cutting their parents off,
Mm,
or going no contact with their parents.
yeah.
And um, in this video, the, the pastor and his wife, you know, I guess their daughter cut them off 6 years ago, and their two grandchildren hadn't spoken to them in over 6 years. And when I watched this video, I was like, I was pretty upset, not at the child, but at the parents, because it's like, A, you're airing your dirty laundry in front of the church.
Mm,
B, um, you're not hearing both sides of the story. You're just hearing the parents and how upset they are. Imagine
uh-huh.
how upset and mortified the child is. And is that going to push them, even further away? And then finally, um, is that kind of ministry going to work? And they were, they were stout, spouting off facts or statistics, and they said that um, one in four millennials are, or 25% of millennial children are walking away from their parents or going no contact.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, I said this was kind of close to the chest. I've had my fair share of the family issues over the last several years, and um, I've gone all but no contact with my family, um, my 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 close family, meaning my father, my sister, my younger brother, my sister's spouse, her kids, um, and I've tried reconciling, but after a couple of years of therapy, the best thing possible was for me and my wife and my daughter to set up a boundary and just stay out of it until they want to fix it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And even through my sickness and being in the hospital for months and months and rehab centers and everything else, I've still yet to hear anything from any of them. So,
Mm.
um, not to make this all about me, but I just wanted your thoughts on
Yeah.
people that are going no contact with their parents.
Hmm.
There's always two sides to every story,
Yeah.
and then
Um,
this couple
mhm.
making a ministry out of it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's two things. The concept of no contact that we're seeing between especially millennials and boomers, because most millennials, their parents are boomers. Maybe a few have like Gen X or even like silent generation parents, but for the most part, it's mostly that group of boomers. Um, and then someone making a ministry of trying to do reconciliation between those two generations. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of discussion, just people's personal testimonies, personal stories about them going no contact with their parents. And what seems to boil down to a lot of it is it really is kind of the expectation versus the reality. So for an example, both my parents worked. So as a kid, elementary age school kid, me and my sister, we were always at my grandma's house. And, my grandma was always fed us, was always there. Anytime when my parents had to do something, a lot of times because we had family in the area up until probably when I was in of age, which of age meaning I was able to drive. So then when my grandma moved back to Iowa and we didn't have any grandparents in the area, it was okay because me and my sister could take care of ourselves at that point. We weren't little anymore. Um, but with that being said, like, my grandma was there. We even had like church people who were kind of like family friends when we were younger who could take care of us. So needless to say, there's always this within my deep childhood memories, there was always this time where, oh, my grandparents were always there and willingly were wanting to would drop everything to be with the grandkids, to hang out with the grandkids, to make sure to make things so a little bit more easier on my parents while they're working or while they're trying to get stuff together, or even when my parents hit rough patches, both in work and relationship, grandparents are there to kind of take care of things, right? Um, Fast forward to now, I have kids, and it was different because we lived all the way out in Virginia when our kids were little. But the fact that my parents would sacrifice a week of their time to drive down twice a year to hang out with our kids, to do fun stuff with them, to do activities, to watch them while Laura and I could have a date night. There was things that kind of helped make that experience based on it. But what I have been seeing is that these are people who literally their parents are live like in the same town. And not once do they offer to take care of the kids, to do that. Maybe they could see that they're struggling, and they're paying for babysitters to watch their kids when their parents could be there. And then when they do kind of ask the parents, like, "Hey, do you think you can watch it?" It's like, "Well, no, I have this," or "No, I'm doing this," or "Oh, I'm going to this thing with my friends." It's almost like the consensus is we don't want to take care of your kids. When their moms and dads were able to take care of them, their kids when they're younger, but we're not seeing the same type of sacrifice or the same type of love that we've been seeing from a previous generation, from the silent generation, watching millennials when they were children. Um, so I think that's kind of been the big issue is just the fact that how come you're not able to step up and do the things that your parents did when we were little, and now that I have kids, you're not willing to do the same thing. That's usually kind of the big meat of it. The other side of it is just the difference as far as, are the parents have toxic behavior, or especially when it comes to politics, that's also another trigger point too, if they have a different in political views. And then it's like, well, I don't want my kids being told or taught by people who have this extreme view of what's happening in the world. So that's kind of another issue. The second thing about making a ministry out of it, as much as I would say, yeah, if there's a need for pastors or for people to do reconciliation to kind of repair that relationship, the problem I have with that video that you mentioned in this scenario is you have people who are stepping down from ministry to start a new ministry to do reconciliation between two generations when they haven't even tried to even start the process of reconciliation with their daughter or with their children.
That's exactly what my wife said as soon
It's
as she
like
showed.
it's like why are you starting a ministry when you I mean that's like clearly the definition of hypocrisy.
Yeah,
Because then it's like because if you can't even reconcile with your own family and you're telling the church, oh yeah, we've been estranged from our family or from our children or whatnot, then why are you starting a ministry when you don't even have a clear-cut example or a curriculum or even a foundation of here's how we've been able to navigate some of these things? Like to me, it almost sounds like, in a way, even especially in ministry, a lot of times pastors, when they're giving an example or they're telling something, it's almost like they kind of put themselves up on a pedestal. Whether intentional or intentionally, people are going to see them, they're putting up that these are the example. So the fact that you have two people who are saying, we're going to leave, we're going to start a new ministry of reconciliation between two generations, because we've been seeing this trend, we experiencing it ourselves with our kid, but it almost kind of makes you have the moral high ground where statistically, from hearing people's testimonies, different stories, statistically, it's usually has been the older generation not really trying to reach out and to really meet the needs of the younger generation, to meet the needs of their children, which is something very simply like, do you want to hang out with your do you want to even get to know your grandchildren?
yeah,
That's really what it comes down to. And it's almost like by their actions, they're saying, no, I don't care to have a relationship with my grandchildren.
yeah. Um, well, and to take it a step further, like how would let's just say Scott that you're a layperson at a
Mhm.
church. You walk in, you've been a part of this church for a while. Your pastor's adult children just suddenly stop showing up to church there, stop, you know, coming around, stop, being a part of the pastor's, whatever,
Mhm.
in respect to church. Do you ask the pastor then, hey, where's your son or daughter at? Are they okay? Like, and how would you feel if like you knew that like, oh, that's kind of a touchy subject, or oh, that's kind of awkward, or oh,
Mhm.
um, they're not coming around anymore. I wonder what happened. Like, like
It's
wouldn't you wouldn't that make you wonder if that just didn't, if that wasn't like, does that make sense what I'm asking?
yeah, but and I think And I think because of that, I don't think a lot of lay people will ask that question because if I did notice, like, hey, you're pastoring this church, your kids were coming, they're no longer here anymore. What's going down? And even if I had the audacity to even ask the pastor directly, or even if I don't have a direct contact, depending on how the church is run, if I can't get a direct contact to the pastor, then who's like the elder or who's the people in charge of leadership that oversee the pastors that work with the pastors to do pastoral care or leadership, like that might be a concern. And I also think that, you know, what's the are people going to be transparent about the reason why? Because if you say, well, it's because of the difference in political opinion, people are not really going to jump in that boat. You know what I mean? Because if you have a pastor that's, let's say, very progressive in their views, and you have children who are more conservative in their views, and there's a clash, and let's just say what has caused the estrangement is the talking and debate about things that are happening in the world, and you're getting into things, well, this side of the aisle is really screwing up our country, and the other person saying, no, it's the other side, they're doing this, they're blah, and you get into this to the point where it's like, well, we're not meeting together at family gatherings because political issues get brought up. We're not going to go because we see how it's affecting our kids. Like they don't like being in a room where there's tension between mommy and daddy and grandma and grandpa. So there's tension there, and the kids are noticing it, and it's affecting their behavior. It's having them ask questions. They're getting concerned about things. So it's just kind of like, okay, you know. So with that being said, I think a lot of church people won't really address the issue because they don't know, and B, they probably think, well, it's a family matter, so it has nothing to do with me.
Well, what if it starts affecting the church and ministry?
Well, and then if it starts affecting the church and ministry, then that's when
And who gets
someone really
involved at
has to
that
say,
point?
well, and even that, because, like, even if people notice something's going on within family dynamics, especially within churches, and especially you may not notice it in larger churches, maybe a select few do, but in smaller churches, you can feel it.
Sure.
You can feel it because it's like everybody's together. And even though people may not be in the know, and people may not be necessarily a gossipy church, hypothetically, but you're going to feel the tension a lot more because you are a more smaller group. So when someone's coming in, you can feel that there's tension between another family member and someone else. You kind of feel that. It's almost like it's a cloud. It's like it's suffocating in some ways. So when it becomes that, then it's really the responsibility of the elder board to or whoever the governance committee is to really address the issue and then even kind of have to say, hey, if it's a matter of just people not being able to reconcile, you might want to take time off and really focus on trying to reconcile with your family.
Yeah. Well, something that you said earlier, though, like the boomer generation, they just don't want to, though,
Well, I
or
won't.
they don't know how.
Well, I think it's a little. And I want to say all boomers because again, my parents are boomers, but yet I don't feel like they're in that category. You know what I mean? But for some people, they are in that. I really think it has to do, they don't really know how to, but let's think about like your grandparents, right? How much was it? How much did they have to pay for their house?
Yeah.
How much money did they need to retire versus how much your parents or my parents need to retire in this day of age? I mean, when you have people who are still working way past retirement because they're just based getting stuff through Social Security, And I think that's also the thing, for my dad being a CFO, he's on his point. He's only has like a couple more years before he retires. So the fact that he can retire and spend all his time doing what he loves, hanging out with the kids, visiting, doing all this, like he can do that. Whereas, someone who maybe doesn't have stuff saved up for retirement, or maybe a pastor who works in small churches all the time and probably doesn't have a lot of thing, they're probably going to be working till the day they die. There is no retirement for them because they can't afford to retire. Or they could afford to retire for like maybe a month, maybe a year, and then after that, they don't have any money because their pension runs out. Social Security's not really helping them that much. Unless they got exempt from Social Security, then that's another issue. But there's things where things are a little bit different. And the political, as much as there was still a lot of political turmoil when my grandparents, your grandparents were living, like there's, they had the JFK assassination was in their decade. So obviously there's a lot of political turmoil in their day and age, but how they talked about it, how they practice it, how they debated with other people and interpret it was a lot different than what we're seeing now. They didn't have cable news networks that could have a potential bias to sway people on one side or the other. Mostly you just have to talk about things basically looking at a newspaper, which in some cases tried to be as neutral as possible. So it was almost like a different time, a different culture, a different lens. And now it's like even if the main reason was political, why there's an estrangement, it's kind of hard for people to have a respectful discourse, even when you have difference of opinions, when a lot of the stuff that's being said about the other side is these people are crooks, they're robbers, they're destroying things. Those that vocabulary means that these people are really bad. These Democrats are really bad. These Republicans are really bad. So when you're trying to have a conversation about just issues that you're seeing and how they affect you, like things like healthcare, things like the economy, things like war and peace and immigration, when you start having those different opinions and you see that your own son and daughter or your own parent is saying something that sounds very much like these are the really bad people, then how do you then view your children? How then you then view your parents? They're really bad because they believe this way.
Yeah. So like
And then,
circling back,
yeah,
is there a place for that kind of a ministry in the local church, and will it work and could it succeed?
I think yes, but it really has to start with the people who are doing the ministry. They have to make sure, have we reconciled? And then not
Our
only
own
that,
problems.
that's good. I mean, that has to be the first thing. But
Yeah.
even like someone like in my position who, I have a great relationship with my parents. And, and again, they're not, you know, even though we live in the same state, we're still about a couple hours away. So even the fact that I can, so even the fact that, I may not have the luxury of having my grandparents watch my grandkids all the time, like my sister does, because she only lives 15 minutes away from them. Um, Yet I see they're caring people. So, but even like things like politics, my dad has his views, I have my view. They're different. But even when we have those debates, we do it respectfully. And when we're very good at asking questions, and even like when the Obamacare stuff came out and I was pastoring a bivocational pastor and I had to get the only way I could get insurance was to go through the health exchange. And my dad seeing, the idea of that, my dad was opposed to as someone who's a conservative, opposed to it, doesn't like it, thinks it's bad, thinks it's going to hurt the economy. He believed all that, right? And then he sees me on it because I have to be on it. And then he sees, like, okay, well, I can see how this can help people. I see how this can work. There's still some flaws that I disagree with, but I believe that if the government can make these changes, then this would actually be a good thing for a lot of people too. And then that really goes by having respectful dialogue. And
Yeah.
again, knowing that I don't see my dad as, oh, he's a bad guy because he believes this. Or my dad sees me, he goes, oh, my son's bad because he believes this. Like that separation, we're the good guys, we're the bad guy mentality that a lot of news has been kind of communicating a lot with people with certain values and certain beliefs is what kind of is tearing families apart. And that's been just testimony from people in the family small groups I have who are estranged from their parents in my ministry setting based on that. How they
Yeah.
responded during the pandemic, how they believed certain things and not necessarily believe certain things, but their belief made them think that, okay, my kids are crazy because they believe this stuff. And then, of course, the kids are saying my parents are crazy because they believe this stuff. And then that caused the division. And then on top of that, if you're in the church and you are reading the same book, the same scriptures, and you're still believing the same things politically, and you're going, well, I can't say how you can call yourself a Christian and believe this. Or I don't see how you can call yourself a Christian and believe this. And then the religious part of it kind of causes that division further because now it's not necessarily what I believe politically. It's basically how I live out my beliefs as a Christian. And you're saying that I'm not a Christian because I'm living it out a different way than you do. Or I'm how I'm living
Yeah.
out the scriptures. You see it as I'm being a sinner when I'm actually reading the scriptures and saying, well, the scripture says this, and that's how I'm living it out. And you're saying that I'm bad for doing it.
Yeah. So like, so what you're saying is it's like we all suck at listening to each other.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
people,
I mean, regardless whether it's politics, whether it's, beliefs,
yeah.
religious theology, um, you name the issue, we don't take the time um to listen to one another. And again, I'm not trying to make this about me at all, but like I remember when I was in the rehab center and in the hospital during my cancer treatments in rehab, that one of my friends who's a pastor came and prayed with me and he asked me what he wanted me to pray for. And I said I wanted to be more like Jesus. Healing was obvious, right?
Hmm.
Going through healing is obvious and trying to be cancer free is obvious, but I want to be like Jesus would be in this circumstance. What would Jesus do in this moment?
Hmm.
And, you know, I got to meet a lot of interesting people in this, during that season of, you know, whether it was a nurse or an aide or somebody to come to visit or, and they were from a um, Orthodox Jew setting or um, Seventh Day Adventist or, Catholic. There was a lot of Catholic
Hmm.
folks in that area. Um, but I got to talk to them and share Jesus with them. But respectfully, I listened to what they had to say too, because I wanted to know what they believed and why. And so we just have to be better at listening. And despite that video making me kind of angry yesterday, I'm just like, I'm sorry that happened to you know, those two and their daughter and their kids and whatnot. But like, I would also like to hear the other side of the story.
Hmm.
And, you know,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's, I mean, it's heavy stuff. And um, especially when you have siblings and let's just say your siblings are, we didn't even talk about this and I don't even want to get into it, but like, let's just say you have a sibling who has completely different thoughts and ideologies than you do, whether it's theology again or politics or how you're raising your kids or how you have or don't have relationships with certain people. And they write you off as a result or take advantage of parents because of that. And so it's it's tough. It's really tough, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that um, in the church. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the, like you said, Scott, in a small group,
Yeah.
family settings that you're seeing, and it's not fun. It's messy. It's hard.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, I've been dealing with it for a couple of years now, and
Yeah.
um, I just the song "Why Can't We Be Friends" just kind of came in my head.
Why can't we'll close out the why can't we be friends?
Yeah, something like that. But like,
Oh,
it's
goodness.
just it's happening more than we think it's happening. And
Yeah.
that couple in that video even spouted off that it was, I think, one in every, or 25% of every, so 1 in 4, 25% of every families are dealing with some sort of estrangement or no contact with their parents or their children, their adult children. So
Mhm. Yeah.
it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. 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 So, friends, let us know what you think. Like, are you in the same boat where you feel like you have conflict with your parents and you're not talking and you're kind of estranged from them, or you've kind of cut them off? Like, we kind of want to know the reasons why. Like, why are you estranged from them? But whether you're on the parent side or on the children's side, and then not only that, but then what would it take for reconciliation to happen between the two? Um, and I think that's going to be kind of helpful, especially for this group that, this couple that wants to try to start this ministry up. God bless them. I hope it works, but I also feel like that's something that they have to kind of work in-house before they're going to try to help other people reconcile as well. So, friends, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll be back on with another episode. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Scott Stedman Podcast. The Scott Stedman Podcast is made possible by support from our listeners. We thank listeners like Patty and Scott, whose support goes to this podcast's continual growth and maintenance. If you want to support this podcast, you can do so in a number of ways. First, feel free to give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed this episode and share it with your friends. If you'd like to financially support the Scott Stedman Podcast, you can go to the website ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. That website again is ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.